everybody. This is Po Kalai Nui. The song that we have just heard is Kana'i au Puni. It talks about the concept of pono, and you will hear that word continually mentioned in that song. Even if you don't speak the Hawaiian language, you are probably familiar with the concept of pono. You will see it written in the state motto. It's written in the Hawaiian national motto. Ua mau ke eo o ka aina I ka pono. Caller in the earlier hour said that she was of Japanese ancestry, third generation here, and deeply ingrained within her was the concept of what is good, to do good. And in essence, she's mentioning the concept of pono, goodness, appropriateness, uprightness, civilness, justice, pono. And so it's part of that deep culture that we had talked about in the earlier hour, this continuing that the life of the land must be preserved in pono, must be preserved in righteousness. So I think it's a very important song that many of our people are not familiar with, and I hope that they would become more familiar with Kana'i au Puni. All right, we had left off the earlier hour in segueing into the issue of rail, and so I wanted to continue with that issue. There's two editorials written in the morning newspaper, as well as two separate columns, one written by Ashley Aubrey and Moses Haya, and they both are attorneys with the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. It appears Ashley Aubrey was the lead counsel in the case of, what was her name, Kalekini, versus both the city and the state people who were pushing for rail. The other side of that question is Dan Grabowski, or Grabauskas, and he is the CEO and executive director for the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation. The two, what is that? The editorials, one by Richard Borica, who actually supports rail, and the other by Tom Kaufman, who I assume is against rail, and their editorials. I wanted to share those editorials with you. I think both of them write very clearly, and so we'll begin with Tom Kaufman, whose Island Voices article at page F2 of the Star Advertiser criticizes the Star Advertiser's editorial that was written quite recently. Tom says, to say the Hawaii Supreme Court sucker punched the rail project, as your Tuesday editorial said, is beyond a poor choice of words. Sucker punching is a cowardly act. In the pinch of the rail project's crisis, you should beware sullying a noble institution. The court stood up for the rule of law. The opinion was written by the Chief Justice, and it was unanimous. You would do better to celebrate the integrity that the court displayed. I had the opportunity to think about the importance of court integrity in writing my biography of Justice Edward H. Nakamura. I respectfully dissent. Nakamura gave his later years to separating the court from selecting Bishop Estate trustees. He succeeded with the result that our court operates with a greater degree of independence and integrity. When an individual puts on the black robe, he or she is obligated to stand apart. The court's concern is not politics, but the law. If our other governmental institutions were working as well, we would not be in this situation. The political strategy behind the rail project was always simple. Rush, rush, spend, spend. Lock it in. Rush, rush worked appallingly well for several years until last week. Many good, intelligent people bought in to an essentially ruthless strategy, which was to push forward and clean up the details later. Early in the life of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, I testified on the subject of archaeology and Hawaiian burials. I said that segmenting the archaeology was not only wrong but highly divisive. Native Hawaiians were again being set up as the impediment to progress. Being haunted by history, I asked the Heart members to go to the Makai Eva corner of the Kawaiihau Church graveyard. There they would find a Hawaiian stone cairn with a memorial to the more than 100 human remains that were dug up when Queen Street was widened by a few feet. This cairn is one of our tools of education. It says that if you dig into the soft soil above Honolulu Harbor, you have an increased likelihood of finding Hawaiian burials. This testimony was greeted with a kindly indifference, albeit wrapped in a concern for, quote, Hawaiian culture. Afterward, I suggested to Don Horner, the most influential of the Heart board members, that Heart's archaeology program could stop the project. Don replied, "The genie is out of the bottle." The one deal or done deal strategy has mesmerized many intelligent people. When I told a member of the congressional delegation that rail was going to blow up, the reply was, "The train has left the station." Peter Carlisle, undaunted by getting only 1/4 of the vote as an incumbent, has said, "As mayor for the next 4 months, I'm going to do everything I can to get rail far enough along so that it cannot possibly be stopped." Most famously, U.S. Senator Dan Inouye said only World War III could stop the project. Let's be clear. It was rush, rush, spend, spend that stopped the project. Its authors, a combination of former Mayor Mufi Hanneman, acting Mayor Kirk Caldwell, Mayor Carlisle, and the Heart Board, stopped the project. If this project had been the super ferry, which it most clearly resembles, you could say they steered it into the reef. Those who want to blame the Hawaii Supreme Court are misguided, as are those who want to blame Plaintiff Paulette Kaleikini. If you want to point fingers, start by looking in the mirror. That was by Tom Kaufman. You can actually read it for yourself or read it again in this morning's paper. It's at section F2 or page 2, section F of the Sunday Star Advertiser. Richard Barreca writes also a very interesting article, and he says that court ruling puts Caldwell between rail and hard place, and he writes on page F1 of that newspaper. And let's see, we just have a telephone caller. I'm going to go ahead and read Barreca's opinion, and then we'll get to the telephones. The Hawaii Supreme Court may be on the way to devouring the career of another Hawaii politician. Former Governor Linda Lingle can argue on a daily basis that she and her administration did nothing wrong because it was the Supreme Court that confused its super ferry ruling. But no one else will believe that. For the general public, weighing the super ferry issue, it is Court 1, Lingle 0. As much as that, it's Court 2, Lingle 0. As much as that early enthusiastic supporter of the super ferry argues that the ship and its dock didn't need an environmental impact statement, the state's highest court said it did, and it would not change its mind. Even after the state legislature passed a law saying the boat didn't need an EIS, the court came back to say it still won't be floating around Hawaiian waters without the paperwork. That court ruling allows super ferry critics to attach illegal to the super ferry plan as the adjective of choice. Now, former acting mayor Kirk Caldwell, running for mayor against former governor Ben Cayetano, has landed in a similar Supreme Court penalty box, and critics can call the Caldwell City Rail Plan illegal. Caldwell did nothing wrong except to say he likes rail and was part of the administration of Mufi Hanneman that rammed the project through. The Hanneman tactic was obvious. Sign every contract, push every bidder, and pile up project after project until it was obvious that momentum of the heavy rail plan made it unstoppable. Along the way, Caldwell never publicly said we should go slow. We should look at making sure this thing is done right. After all, we are spending $5.3 billion in taxpayers' money. So now the court says stop it and obey all the laws, not just some of them. By finding that the city improperly began construction before completing a required archaeological survey, the court has delayed the project in many ways. Opponents have more time to appeal if their federal lawsuits initially falls. It gives time for Cayetano to continue work on his, quote, "I told you so" speech. What it doesn't do is give Caldwell any more room to maneuver. The issue remains in the courts, and it is premature to comment on what will happen with rail. I remain a strong supporter of the rail project, as I believe it is our best option for traffic relief, Caldwell said in a brief statement after the court ruling. I would really like to see a better option if there is one, he concluded. Now the option may not be Caldwell's or other rail supporters' liking. If the city does go back to surveying the entire route, and as expected, it finds a downtown and Kaka'ako area dotted with ancient Hawaiian burials, the survey will stretch out. The mitigation plans will become much more complex. The train is slated to go down Halekawila Street in an area that already is lined with existing buildings such as the Federal Building, an office building filled with lawyers, and the state tax office. Hint to the city: do not even think about telling the feds you want their land. Hint to city number 2: do not tell a building filled with lawyers about eminent domain. And hint to city number 3, ditto for the state. If you can't go up and you can't go down and you can't go left or right, you really can't go, can you? That is Caldwell's dilemma. Without a rail plan to run on, his campaign's biggest motivational theme disappears. Okay, that's Richard Barreca. I misspoke in the earlier, before reading his article, saying that one writer was for the rail and one was against the rail. Richard really hasn't disclosed his position on the rail itself, and so I did misspeak when I talked about my expectation of how he came down on the rail itself. Okay, so if you have any questions, our telephone number is 524-1080. To the caller who had intended on calling earlier, but obviously didn't want to hang on while I read this long piece, you can call back and we'll put you on the radio and see what you have to say about what is happening now with regards to the rail, or if you want to talk about some of the other issues that we have already addressed, give me a call. Telephone number here is 524-1080. And anyone else who would like to get on the radio, give me a call. We'll include you in on the radio. Okay. Now, with all of that said, I come across an earlier article that had been written, but I did not come across it until yesterday. And it's written by a Kehau Nani Abad, who's has a PhD. I think it's in the area of archaeology. We'll get to talk about hers, and she writes about, despite warnings and pleas, rail headed for Burials Central, which is in the Kaka'ako, Honolulu area. Let's go to our telephone lines. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
It seems can you hear me? It seems like I got a buzz or a lot of interference.
I can hear you fine. There is some slight interference in the telephone lines, but otherwise I can hear you very well.
Yeah, in regards to the rail and the EV and Keli'ikini, he did mention the fact that Baraka mentioned that it's going in an area like Kaka'ako, densely built, been dug up over and over again, this little swath that's going through this area.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if there were any burial sites, it would have been found or been buried under streets and concrete buildings. I don't know what to say. It's different in the even in the fields in Kapolei. If there were EV, it would be dug up over and over by the sugar plantations. I think there was a large Hawaiian population in the Kailailoa area, and Tahitians, which are eventually settled in the area. So I don't see what the big problem is going through an area that is densely built. In regards to Keli'ikini, where was she when all these condos are being built in Kaka'ako, and they're still being built? I don't see any attempt from her to stop the building these condos because of perhaps burial sites. Why is she picking on the rail, which only cutting a narrow swath to the main portion of Honolulu, whereas Kaka'ako, the buildings is starting, and Halikawila Street and in that general Kaka'ako area. And one more question about this guy Franco. Is her lawyer, is he a Hawaiian? Or if he's not Hawaiian, why did she engage a haole from the mainland to do a Hawaiian's job? Why didn't she engage a Hawaiian lawyer? We have a lot of Hawaiian lawyers who could use them. And does she have the money to pay for this lawyer? Where is she? Is she a wealthy person? And then I'll end on that note and listen to your answers.
Okay. And if you want to call back, feel free to call back, and I will try to respond to you. First of all, with regards to this, well, let me take the last one first, because I may not remember it later on. It appears that what she did was she went to the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, and the legal corporation normally appoints attorneys working within the legal corporation to represent the clients. In this particular case, it's very apparent that the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation agreed to take her case and then made its appointment. And one of the lawyers was Ashley Aubrey, and I believe the second one was a Mr. Franco. And so I believe both attorneys were assigned out of the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. I don't know about her wealth, and I think that is really not relevant to her raising the issue, it may be relevant to her being able to afford private counsel, but I don't understand Mr. Frankel to have been private counsel. And oftentimes, private counsel may be willing to represent clients either pro bono or on a basis of attorney's fees at the end of the case, and if the case is won. So it's sort of what we call a contingency arrangement. So there's many different ways of financing one's lawsuit. In this particular case, I don't know if the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation has billed Ms. Kalei for that representation, and I don't think that they did. Now, with regards to the site itself and the many burials found there, the caller is suggesting that there have been a lot of other construction that has gone over that site, and so why is she railing against rail and the disturbance rail will have? Well, I think people are saying that there are burials still in that area, and that archaeological test shows by spot testing that there are indeed burials. The law requires that this rail project do its archaeological digs before beginning the project. That has not been followed. Whether or not other projects completed their archaeological digs or did not, I don't know. I don't know when those projects took place and when the law came in with regards to doing those projects. I can find out. I do have an article written by Kehaunani Abad, and if we have time, we will go into that article as well. So in comparison with rail and what other projects have occurred, I don't think you can justify a subsequent project based on other projects not either having been under the same scrutiny. And where was Miss Kalei at that time? Maybe she wasn't born. Maybe she wasn't a member of the burial council at that time. The fact is that she did bring that lawsuit. She did require that the state and the city follow the law, which they had not followed, and the Supreme Court was in agreement with her. As to the next question of many of these burials have already been covered over, that may be the case. But let's remember that a street covering over or the development of utility lines under an area does not necessarily go as deep as some of these burials may be, and it may not be directly in line with those streets. The impact of the excavation to place these cement construction, what do you call it, these large amounts of cement, and the depth that it goes into is far different from what the streets now have, or what Kauai Hau, cemetery now has. It doesn't go and disturb as much as what we expect will be disturbed. I note that my time is up for this section of the program.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka pata. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pi'ilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'apu me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa. lava